Okay, so in this video, we are going to add a wind zone. That way, we have the flakes move in a general direction. Up to this point, we tried to basically fake making the snowflakes look like they're being affected by air by having the flakes crisscross, by having two entirely different particle systems going in different directions. It kind of fools the eye to make it look like they're fluttering when in fact they're traveling in diagonal lines. They're not really fluttering down. It just confuses the eye, which is fine. There's lots of optical illusions that you do in game design. But if we want the overall flakes to be moving in a certain direction, and we want to have that change over time, we're going to have to use a wind zone. So we're going to go to Game Object, 3D Object, and we go to Wind Zone. Just like that, it generates one. Now you can do whatever you want with your wind zone. To make the change the most obvious, or should I say the effect the most obvious, I'm going to rotate the wind zone so it's blowing in this direction. See, here's a camera. Camera's looking this way, and you certainly could do that. Maybe you're doing something where you want particles to be blowing away from you. But just to get a feel for the effect, I'm going to rotate the wind zone. So we'll click on a rotate tool. We're going to grab that ring. So we're pivoting it on the Y axis. So if you noticed, Y is the one that's changing. So we'll just bump this up to 90. So you can see the arrows pointing in this direction, now perpendicular to the direction that the camera is facing. So we're just going to take the move tool, slide this over. Now, if we were to run this, there would be no effect. In fact, if you want to just see the preview, you can see no effect. Click on the other particle system. You can see that it's not being affected. So just like how we had to say, let the particle systems know that they were going to collide with this surface, we have to let the particle systems know that they're going to be affected by wind. How do you do that? Well, have one of the particle systems selected, come over here to the inspector, and you'll see external forces. So even though it's called external forces, this is for the wind zone. In fact, if you see the tooltip there, it even mentions the wind zone. So why it doesn't just say wind zone, don't know. So external forces. And as soon as I do that, you can see they're now blowing around the ground. We'll click on the other particle system. Again, external forces. That one's also blowing on the ground now. And before we go any further, what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the size of the ground because you can see they're just like blowing off the ground. So we're going to click on this and we're going to scale the X. It looks like it's at 1.9 whatever for whatever reason. Don't remember why it's that size, but we'll just bump that up to like 5. And now we'll run it. So technically, that's what we're trying to do. We now have the wind blowing the particle system, and we can now see the snow moving along the ground. Kind of like if you go to flurry and it's not really sticking, it's just kind of moving around. But for our demonstration, we have like a dead zone here, and there's going to be a dead zone up here too. So what we can do is we can increase the area in which the particles are being spawned. So like if you click on the particle system, if you recall, there's a shape there. You can just increase the size of the shape, or if you want, you can move the particle system. As far as changing the size of the shape, when you have the particle system selected, you can just click on shape. You now see the shape, and you can just click on one of the points and expand it out if you want to. Okay. If you're going to do that, just keep in mind that since you're increasing the area, then that means the concentration is going to be reduced because you have an emission rate, and that emission rate is now being generated in a larger area. So inherently, the concentration is less. So this is what I was mentioning in the other videos, that it's kind of like sculpting, that as you make one change, you might have to make another change to compensate. So if you decide to go that route and make your particle systems larger, remember, you might have to also change the emission. Okay, so we're just going to move this one instead. So I have the move tool selected. I have the particle system selected. We're just going to move it here so we don't have such a dead zone. And let's see how that looks. There we go. Not so bad. You can see snow coming in from the side. Not quite hitting there, but not a big deal. But just like that, you've cleared that up. Now, we could just kind of say, all right, let's call it a day, but we're going to go a little bit further because it's still pretty consistent. It's still basically moving, the wind is moving it. There's not enough variance. So let's look at how we do the variance. So if we go back to our wind zone, you don't have a lot. You have directional, you have spherical, which we're not going to use. You have the main amount of force. You have turbulence. You have the magnitude of a pulse magnitude, and frequency. So say you do something like make this a, and again, just like the particle system, this is kind of like sculpting. It's not set in stone. I'm just going to put in a few numbers so you can see the difference. So let's do a pulse magnitude of 1 with a pulse frequency of 1. Okay, so let's do a pulse magnitude of, say, 5. So it's a little bit more distinct. You can definitely see every few seconds. There you go. And now you've added a lot more noise to the storm. Now, in our specific example, you have some dead zones. We don't have enough area covered. But now you really have a sense of distortion, and now it's really picking up. And so it's just a matter of playing around with the different settings to decide what gets you what you want. That's probably a little bit too severe. I mean, the main you could reduce, like maybe say make it 0.5. Okay, and let's just mess with the frequency a bit. Okay, so let's go back to main 1. Pulse frequency, do 2. And the last thing that I want to show you in this video, I want to demonstrate that just like other objects, you can change the attributes in this component just like other components using a script. So in other words, right now we do have some variance, we have some pulses, but what if you want the overall severity of the storm to increase or decrease? Maybe there's a trigger, or maybe it's based on time, but you want the storm to change because even here you've basically set up fairly consistent parameters. You have pulses, but overall severity stays the same over time. So what if you want to change that? So you can use a script to change those attributes. You can do the same thing with the particle systems as well. You can change the emission rate. I think I'll save that for a separate video because unfortunately changing particle systems is a little bit more difficult. It's not as easy as just doing get component. It requires a little bit more slicing and dicing. So we'll just do the wind zone for the end of this video. So right click down here, create C# script. We'll call it storm. Take our wind zone, apply the storm to it, and open it up. So we'll keep it simple. We will just do a coroutine that delays a few seconds, and then we'll change the wind main attribute. So outside of start, outside of update, i.e. numerator, we'll call it storm delay. The capitalization is really arbitrary. Brackets. Yield. Return. New. Wait 4 seconds. 5. As I've mentioned in my other videos, even though I try to explain everything, or I like to try to explain everything, don't worry too much about this. Yes, you have to type it, but when you're looking at the sentence, focus on this. This is really what you're trying to do. You're telling the system to wait 5 seconds. After it waits 5 seconds, you want it to do something. So, get component, and it's the wind zone component. And even though it's called main, when you're looking at it in the inspector, whoops, sorry, I'm not sure why I did that. Sorry. It's called wind main here. So if you go to, like I said, the inspector, if you click on wind zone, it says main, but for whatever reason, code says wind main. So the name doesn't match exactly the same for some reason, but that's the value that you're changing. And let's make it something dramatic so it's obvious. I'm not saying you would want to use this value, but again, I want to demonstrate that it really is working. Don't be like me. Whenever you create a coroutine, make sure you actually call it, because this will never ever run on its own until you call it. So we'll put that in the start section. So start coroutine, parenthesis, storm delay, more parentheses, semicolon at the end. So basically, the name of the coroutine is storm delay with parentheses. So there's storm delay with parentheses. The whole thing then has to be surrounded by another set of parentheses. So the scene starts. The coroutine gets initiated. The coroutine says wait 5 seconds and then change the main to 10. And we save it. And we should be ready to run this. We already put the script on the win zone, and that should do it. So it's going to wait 5 seconds. And there you go. So like I said, you probably wouldn't actually want to use that unless you're in something really powerful storm like a squall. And then it really gets kind of crazy because you have the different attributes conflicting with each other, all trying to calculate an end result. So you got the pulse magnitude, the turbulence. So keep that in mind as you're trying to get the effect that you want. But that should do it. So if you have any questions, let me know. If you want, I can do the same thing for the particle system. I'm going to save that for a separate video. I think I mentioned that already because modifying a particle system is really more complicated and I have to give more of explanation. It's not as easy as just get component. You really have to break down the particle system a little bit more. For whatever reason, I'm not sure why Unity makes it that difficult. But anyways, if you'd like to see that, just do a like for this video because I've noticed that the amount of views are already dropping off. But I'm more than happy to continue the series if you guys want it. So, all right, if you have any other questions, just let me know.